Hi, and welcome to the Practically Minimal blog. If we haven't met yet, I'm Shauna, and I'm the founder of Practically Minimal. And here on the blog, we explore all things minimalism and mindfulness, and all kinds of topics that surround that. So I am super excited. We have an awesome guest today, you guys. We have Makyla Burke. Hey, Makyla.
Hey.
She is a personal development coach and the founder of I Am W.O.M.A.N Blog. So Makyla, she helps people achieve their personal growth goals, develop a growth mindset, and take a healthy and sustainable approach to self-improvement in her role as a personal development coach. So welcome to the blog, Makyla. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. And today we've got a pretty cool topic, actually. We're going to be talking about setting personal boundaries. So I know that this is definitely something that comes up within the minimalism community, especially when you're first starting to explore that kind of a lifestyle. Because really minimalism is all about deciding what's essential for you in your life, and then, letting go of everything else that doesn't fit that. So with the letting go, sometimes you got to set up a few boundaries that you didn't have before. So definitely excited to get your perspective on this, Makyla.
Absolutely.
But before we dive into it, let's just share with us a little bit about you and how you started your blog and how you kind of gotten to where you are today.
Sure. So I started the I Am W.O.M.A.N blog. By the way, it stands for the woman is acronym for working on myself and narrative. And that's really what the purpose of starting the blog was. I started back in 2019 as a way to kind of explore personal development and pursue my own growth journey and just share what I was learning with other people during a time where I couldn't work and I needed kind of something to fill my time. So I moved here from Canada to the US in 2018. And after a year of going through immigration, just decided that I needed to go into the following year with a little bit more of a purpose and just something to kind of fill my time with. And the blog was birthed out of that. And 2 years later, or a year later, should I say, so last year I did my certification as a life coach. And I've been pairing the two ever since, sticking with my passion for personal development to kind of help continue to perpetuate this idea of like a healthy approach to personal development and help people just develop that growth mindset that you were talking about earlier.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, I kind of started mine around the same time, so it's amazing, to see. And I think we connected on Instagram around like
Mhm.
kind of in the early days, right? So
Yeah, I
it
think
was,
so.
yeah, super cool to see how you kind of gone the direction you've gone with your blog and how you've kind of grown it into your career as it is now. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Um, Okay, so let's get into the good stuff here. So personal boundaries.
Yeah.
How would you define them? What is a personal boundary, just to kind of start off?
Personally, personal boundaries are really just defined as the guidelines and rules that we set within our life and the ways that we want to be treated, kind of, and just kind of let that be known to people and have kind of a response to what happens once those lines are crossed. Simply put, it's just about what's okay versus what's not okay, what we accept versus what we won't accept from others. And when I think about it, it really just comes to protecting your energy, protecting your space, your mental health, your overall well being, recognizing your self worth, and having that confidence to kind of advocate for yourself and set those boundaries in place so that people know what they are. And then you're kind of creating a space for yourself where you're not overexerting yourself in areas where you don't need to be, especially after the year that we just had. I think that boundaries are just something that's so essential. And if anything, is when I really noticed that they were lacking from my life and was when I really started to kind of put them in place. So yeah, that's what boundaries are. It's really just about what we accept from others and what we won't accept from others, and kindly putting some ground rules to kind of maintain those. And I hate the word consequences, but just having a kind of like response system for what happens when those boundaries are crossed.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, it is inevitable, especially if it's something that you're just kind of starting to put into place.
Right.
So, kind of knowing what, expecting that there might be a little bit of resistance to that and deciding in advance how you're going to handle it. I can see how that would be extremely helpful for sure.
Absolutely.
Why do you think, I know that like a lot of, and it's not always an easy thing to do, but why do you think it is so challenging for people to, to actually set up the boundaries and then enforce them once they've set them up?
Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of us don't realize that we have boundaries to begin with. Internally, you know that something feels wrong when it's crossed, or when you're saying yes to something that you don't really want to say yes to, you feel that within you. But it's not something until recently that people really started to talk about and bring to the forefront as something that's really crucial to our overall wellness. And so I think that unfortunately what happens is that once our boundaries are crossed just so many times over and over and over again, it leads to kind of tension and potentially conflict between you and whoever is that's crossing that boundary. And that's when people tend to get the most fed up with it. It's once that's just, you're so tired of having this kind of like tennis ball back and forth type of situation between the two of you, that eventually you just can't take it anymore. And you're like, I need boundaries. And so boundaries can sometimes seem in that kind of environment as an attack or some type of like punishment towards the person who's crossing those boundaries. And so I think that's why it seems difficult, is we feel guilty. We feel bad for setting boundaries. We want to make people happy. We want especially for people pleasers, like I once was, and it's still something that I try to deal with. But I think that it can just feel really uncomfortable because it's not something that we're used to doing. But hopefully the more and more that people talk about boundaries, the more, I don't want to say easy because it's always going to feel a little uncomfortable at first, but the more that we set those boundaries, the kind of easier it becomes. And like I said, the more that you kind of recognize that self-worth, you develop that confidence to just eventually stop caring about, well, oh, but this person's going to say this or this person's going to react like this, and really just do it for yourself. Because at the end of the day, you're not doing it to hurt anybody. You're doing it to protect you at the end of the day, right? And so that's only coming from a place of self-love and self-worth. And anyone who truly respects you is going to respect that as well.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just coming back to like the reason why you're doing it in the first place. And
yeah,
it sounds like definitely a journey that takes a little bit of practice.
absolutely.
For a lot of practice,
It depends, each one of us have our own struggles. I've seen it with myself and some past clients that it is a bit more of a challenge just because there's so many layers to it. But once you kind of get the grip on that, is really, really beneficial. And I'm very proud of the boundaries that I've been able to set up, and the boundaries that I'll keep setting up moving forward is always going to be an integral part of how I live my life now.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. Do you have any tips about like how to determine like what your boundaries should be, or like is there anything that kind of worked for you? Like how did you kind of figure out, what you needed to set boundaries around?
Right. Realistically, boundaries were necessary in my life decades ago. But unfortunately, it didn't become prevalent for me until in-laws and being married and realizing that there needed to kind of be this conversation about what those boundaries were. And of course, that's really uncomfortable at first. And something that kind of you need to build up the courage to have. But the tips I would say to just kind of get started is to know what you want and what you deserve. Like it's kind of, we're just starting at the basics. It's really just like, okay, take some time to sit with yourself. What are things that boundaries that you feel like people have been crossing? Why does that bother you? Why is that triggering something inside of you? Or why do you feel like you keep saying yes to things that you don't want to say yes to? Why do you keep giving your energy away when you don't have the energy to give away? I think being very self-aware and having that honest conversation with yourself is the very first step, because then you can kind of deal with the other things that come afterwards. And another basic tip is just knowing your rights. It's well within your right to have boundaries and to say no when you don't want to do something, and to be treated with respect, and to make your needs as important as other people's needs. These are all rights that we should have. And I think a lot of us tend to forget that. And so that's where I would start. And that's where I've started with some of my clients in the past.
Right. Yeah, no, those are some really good points. And I think too, something really powerful that you said was sort of around like just having the right to say no to something. So like we don't need to invent like a big long excuse or explain away why we don't want to do certain things. Just being able to politely, decline should really be enough.
Yeah, I think we're so used to always having to give a reason for something. Why aren't you going to this? Because, and it just always feeling that we have to give a reason for some things. And sometimes, that helps to kind of cushion it a little bit more and to make those boundaries seem less intimidating, like I said, and not as like some type of punishment. So it does help to express those things. But even just letting people, when you say that to people, it's your right to say no. It's your right to ask to have boundaries in place and to ask for those to be respected. You start to see things differently. It's not so much of a scary idea of like, this is hurting someone, because like I said, it's not coming from that place. And so long as you're not coming from that place, then the message shouldn't be lost in that. And sometimes people have don't understand that and don't want to respect that, but then that becomes, I don't want to say their problem, because it's still going to impact you, but it does become an issue with them. Like, why is it that your boundaries are affecting them or make them angry or anything like that? Like that's then a conversation they need to have with themselves. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Right. Yeah. So not feeling responsible for like the other person's reaction. But again, something that I think will take time and practice as you
absolutely
start, getting into.
Even with all of these tips, it's never a one shot, just go and then all of a sudden all of your boundary issues are solved within a day. It takes weeks, and especially with the closer the relationships, I feel like the longer it takes to kind of nurture the understanding of those boundaries. For example, when you're trying to set boundaries with parents is a lot more different than trying to set boundaries at work or even with friends. So each one of those categories has their own challenges, and it's just about navigating those. And again, at the end of the day, you're doing it for yourself, and those who love you will understand that and should respect that.
Absolutely. And any tips around, how to kind of start setting personal boundaries within your life? I mean, you've touched on this a little bit already, but if you were going to kind of maybe even give like a little bit of a guideline or, some steps to get started, if there is a one size fits all kind of, kind of tips, like what advice?
Well, that's the thing that I was trying to be mindful of when I wrote the blog article about this topic, was like, I know there's never a one size fits all approach to anything, but we're talking about just the basics of setting boundaries. What I came across really was the two things that we mentioned before. So just knowing what you want and deserve, and then just knowing your basic rights, and then, understanding that you have those rights and you're allowed to have that. The next part would be to just let people know, to have those conversations, even if they are uncomfortable, they're worth having, because as uncomfortable and scary as they seem going in, they usually have a good turnout at the end. Again, like I said, people should be very understanding of these things. And if your delivery and just expression of like why it is that these boundaries are important to you, what having these boundaries crossed has been doing to you, or like what that's doing to you, whether it's robbing you of your energy or impacting your mental health, whatever it may be, just letting people know it's important to have those conversations, because it's all good to have boundaries, but if you don't let people know what they are, they can't respect them, right? They're invisible. You can't draw it and let people actually see them. They're not tangible. So you have to express them to other people. Right. And then I guess the next part after that would be it's just really owning up to the idea of being comfortable speaking up for yourself. I know that that's something that I struggled with in the past. Again, like it comes from the idea of not wanting to make other people uncomfortable, but in doing so, I'm making myself uncomfortable. And I kind of had to relearn that. And so getting comfortable speaking up for yourself is definitely a key point. And then the next thing I would say is to ask for help, whether it's reaching out to a coach who's an expert in these, or talking to a therapist, or confiding in a friend. I think it's really important to ask for help and support when it comes to setting boundaries. If you're having a really hard time and you're not feeling like your boundaries are being respected, even after having these conversations, then asking for help and support in that area would be the next step, I would think.
Right. Yeah. That was great. So good. That was a great roundup. So how can people find you? How can they connect with you? I'll make sure that your website and everything is linked to the page with this blog post. But how can people connect with you?
Yeah, it's the I Am W.O.M.A.N Blog .com, and then people can also find me at Makyla Burke on Instagram, and the I Am W.O.M.A.N Blog on Facebook and Twitter as well, I believe is how I framed it. Yeah, I haven't been on those in a little bit, but yes, it should be the I Am W.O.M.A.N Blog on all fronts except for Instagram is Makyla Burke.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Makyla, for this. This was amazing. I mean, it's given me lots to think about for sure, and to kind of keep practicing the boundaries and figuring out what they should be. But this was great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.